Hi, I'm Kate from What Mortgage, and today I'm joined by Aaron Tyson, who's the Director of Open Financial Advice, who's going to be talking to us about mortgage advice and why you should use a broker. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks for
today.
having me.
It's really lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
First of all, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do and your job?
Well, it's mainly sort of trying to understand what people need first and foremost, and trying to find out the best way to deliver on what those needs are. So with mortgages, that can be relative to specific criteria, something that maybe something that somebody would need, sort of flexibility, something like that. I guess at the core of it, it's really trying to get a deep understanding of the client to then be able to advise them correctly on what they should do.
Yeah, sure. So when somebody comes to you and they're interested in taking out a mortgage, you'll be finding out a little bit about maybe their lifestyle and their spending habits, things like that.
Yeah, income, expenditure, all of those things really important. Sort of, it's children, getting to know them, creating that sort of connection with them. I think that the main things to know are the types of employment. That can be really important for mortgage lending.
Yeah, sure. So when you say types of employment, I presume you mean whether they're self-employed or earning bonuses, things like that, or
So self-employed. I mean, because you get people ranging from normal PAYE employees all the way up to people who are paid in capital events. Sort of after sort of self-employed. So anywhere in between, there's probably about 15, 20 different types of ways that you can be employed.
Yeah. So why should somebody use a mortgage broker? Because obviously we can go to banks, we can look and see what mortgages banks have got, or we can go on comparison sites. What does a mortgage broker offer that the other options don't?
I think it's actually a bit of a complex question, because the short answer would be sort of service, understanding clients, like I said before, trying to leverage the market for clients. But I think that it's really important to understand that every bank has got very set criteria. It's not robust. So it's a yes or no. And the way that banks are set up is, an attitude of, we're here to help, and we're there for you, and we understand you. But in reality, there is a very limited amount that banks can do outside of their criteria, and that changes regularly. So having a really true and broad understanding of how that mortgage market works from back to front in terms of swap rates, understanding sort of why lending happens in different areas and what banks are trying to achieve, all of that is a big part of being able to place a case correctly, to make sure that there's no issues, and what people want is able to be delivered upon. So that's kind of the key. But second to that, it's relationships. In terms of banks, they can't really advise. They just offer their products, which may or may not be suitable. And I think if you ask somebody in the street, what they thought about banks, they would go, "Oh, I don't know." But if you ask them about their bank, they say, "Oh no, I like my bank. That's it's fine." And we've got this kind of disconnect with the truth of the matter, where banks are very rigid in what they can do, and people then just go into their own bank when it may not be right for them. So we can sort of cut through that and allow people to understand what's really best for them.
Yeah, because I know when we took our mortgage out, we wanted to find the best rate, and that's why we chose a mortgage broker. So are you looking for the best rates as well? And
of course, yes. That? Sorry, that's obviously the top most important thing. But in terms of it's kind of getting the best rate, the best value for the client is always massively important. That's a given. But it's but more than that, it's really trying to manage the finances as best possible now, but long term into the future as well.
Yeah, and do you help anybody? Do you have to be like a remortgager, or will you help first time buyers?
Yeah, anybody. I think it's really important to understand with mortgage brokers in general, they are there to answer questions. So if you want to speak to somebody about something that you're considering, that you just want a bit of initial advice to understand what your options are, in every case that I've come across, that's free, including with my own company. So it's very informal. It's it's a good way to sort of understand what people are trying to do. So first time buyers, remortgages, if you're a buy-to-let landlord, any kind of property related financing is something that brokers generally can help with.
Okay, so if I was a first time buyer, for example, and maybe I wasn't quite ready to buy yet, and I hadn't even really started saving, but I just wanted to find out what to do.
Yeah.
Would you be able to help me in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mind taking 10, 15, 20 minutes to explain how it works, because
Okay.
it's really it can be a little bit daunting. Or really there's more parts of the process that people perhaps don't understand. So trying to map out where things go from start to finish, why I would suggest X or Y, a little bit about the current economy and why rates are where they are and what we expect to see in the future. All of that helps to paint a picture for a prospective client to understand what may be good for them, and that's part of informing first-time buyers or whoever.
Comparison websites. I wanted to ask you about that. A lot of people might just go on to, go to one of the comparison websites and look for mortgages that way. Obviously, they can find the best rates. Is that a good option? Would you advise that in sort of along with a mortgage advisor as well? Or
I think it's it's a facility. At the end of the day, it's a facility, and the key thing to understand about comparison sites is that sometimes they aren't whole of market, so you'll get a panel of lenders that are available, and really crucially, it doesn't tell you what this bank's criteria is. So there's a high, most first-time buyers, well, I should say 25% of first-time buyers in the last year have experienced declines as a result of clients going direct rather than speaking to brokers, which dropped from 70% in 2022 to about 34% in February this year. So comparison sites are a great way to attribute value, but that's really all you're doing. All you're demonstrating is the ability to use a comparison site and not finding out really what's best for you and what your needs may be.
Sure. And what other things do you kind of help people with in the mortgage process? Because I know there was protection. You do mortgage protection, is that right?
Yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah, protection I think is kind of the wrong term. So there's been loads of studies on the term protection, and people don't know what it means, which is why it's a good question, because I would refer to it as kind of financial security.
Sure.
And it is the facility of being able to cover your finances in a cheap way to make sure that you're covered in the event of death, critical illness, income protection, and all of that. My role in that scenario is to try to obtain that as cheaply as possible. So similar to a mortgage really, but we know what the need is, we know what the mortgage will be, we know what the debts will be. And I think that many people understand the facility of a mortgage to be able to buy your first property or buy the property that you want, but they tend to forget that this is the biggest lifetime debt that you're ever going to have. It requires servicing every month, rain or shine, well or not well, working, not working. And, that's where protection is designed to step in, help you out and financially secure your home, your finances.
Yeah. And does the type of protection you have depend on your situation again? Is it a bit like with the type of mortgage? Does it depend if you have children or?
Well, a good example would be sort of, interest only and repayment mortgages. So a repayment mortgage is decreasing, so you can have decreasing life cover. An interest only mortgage remains level, so you'd have level life cover. But in terms of that, there's more factors like the type of work that you do, your health, in terms of recent history. So again, that can be very niche in terms of which providers will accept that. So not only do we need to know what the lenders will do, there's about 200. So knowing every single bank and understanding what they do is obviously a big part of our job, but understanding what providers will accept is the other side for making sure that people's finances are sort of well looked after.
Yeah, and one final question from me just before we move on, because we've actually got a reader question as well. Somebody wrote in to ask a question. But for me, a lot of people say to us, is using a broker good value? Obviously, you're going to have to pay for that service in a lot of situations. What value do you think you offer as a broker? Why would somebody use you?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think that for the most part, there are brokers that charge fees. There are some that don't. The way that my firm is set up, there's the option to pay a fee, or if we do two services, then we'll waive the fee. So it can be a little bit more pragmatic in relation to what people kind of want. In terms of, the value, of course, we talked about the understanding of exactly what mortgages, in terms of what the lenders will do, the criteria, understanding that deeply is just not easy to know, and it's not something that clients would know straight off the bat. So there's that, but also, you know, there's a big part of assisting clients all the way through the process as the first point of contact. As a buyer, there's nobody really there to support you. As a seller, you've got the agent who may or may not be too busy or whatever. But in terms of the purchase process, the person who's on your side is your advisor. And similarly, you know, if you aren't happy with the fee that you're paying, or you don't think it will be good value, don't use them. Speak to another one. You know, seek out what you think is best for your circumstances. There are options out there.
I mean, it's just really good to have someone on your side, I think, isn't it, when you're buying, making the biggest purchase of your life?
Yeah, because all the way through the legal process as well, that's quite common to see. So it's through, you know, the lender process through to offer, and then all the way through the legal process, which conveyancers, they don't give you a great deal of support in understanding how that process works and where pressure needs to be applied and understanding how to do the paperwork, etc. So we can come in relation to that, guide it all the way through, and well, in all cases that I work on, it's, you know, from the very beginning until you get the keys to your home. So it's really sort of comprehensive throughout the process to look after clients.
Yeah, sounds ideal. Right, I'm going to move on to our reader question now. So here we go. So this is from Emma, who is from Lincolnshire. How do I find a mortgage advisor? Should I look locally in my high street, or are there other options?
Yep, so there's loads of options. So there's companies like Unbiased, where you can go on and search for IFAs, independent financial advisors, or mortgage brokers. There's other companies like Bark and Vouched For. So Vouched For is a popular one where it has sort of reviews that are checked by the company, so you can see what, you know, firms will do and typically what they charge. But I would say the most effective way is probably to have a look on Google and just see what you find and speak to a few people. Don't need to settle for the first sort of firm. Reviews are everything for an advice firm. So, you know, seeing that people have had good experiences is a big driver for people to work with them. So to seek that out is what I would recommend to do.
Yeah, brilliant. That's fantastic advice. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.